Hi, I'm Eileen Hale. Remember me from Çatalhöyük in Turkey. I'm now here in Camp Verde, Arizona, at Montezuma Castle. So Montezuma Castle was named by European settlers. They also named the Sinawa people Sinawa, which means without water. The whole way that we see this land and the peoples was very influenced by Spanish and later European settlers that misunderstood the area. First of all, Montezuma was an Aztec emperor, and he wasn't born until about 100 years after the people had vacated the site. Also, the fact that Sinawa means without water doesn't take into account the wealth of water that's actually in this area. However, overpopulation did affect the people, and in a moment you're going to meet my mom, Eileen Hale, who's an amateur archaeologist. She studied this area for about 17 years, and she's going to tell you about the people and about how overpopulation most likely affected how long they were here and where they went.
Hi, I'm Eileen. I'm going to introduce you to Montezuma's Castle. You saw it behind us. This castle is over 800 years old now. It used to be open for tourist visitation. You'd have to climb a series of ladders to get up there. Unfortunately, with the increase in population and visitors, nobody's allowed up there anymore to preserve it. It's sun-baked, dried adobe bricks, covered with plaster. And then Montezuma's Castle is 5 stories high.
Like any camp place, national park.
It was home to about 50 people and consists of 20 rooms. You accessed it by a series of ladders, so it was very hard work getting up and down. If you look at how it's built, it looks rather like a defensive position. It's well hidden in the limestone alcove. The way many of the roofs are made in the Southwest in these Pueblo-style buildings, they would start with, they'd have to fell giant trees. In this case, we have sycamores here. They would have to fell them with a stone axe. They would then lay beams across the top. Then they would work their way down to smaller and smaller twigs and trees, and then they'd cover it with leaves and clay. But anyway, because it is set back in the alcove, it was protected from water and rain and wind, and those original roof beams are all still intact up there. That's amazing.
And remember from Çatalhöyük some of the tools that we saw there in the museum. This display is showing the different tools that they used here. And very interesting is this obsidian blade. Remember the one that we saw in Çatalhöyük? Very similar. They also used stone knives here. And of course, mortar and pestle. So they would grind corn and roots, plants with these tools. There's another stone axe. It's truly incredible what the Sinawa were able to create with these tools. Think back to Çatalhöyük. That was layer upon layer, one generation building on top of the last. Montezuma Castle, on the other hand, is more like an ancient apartment building where there are 5 stories, but they were inhabited simultaneously. Now we're going to move down from the castle, the high-rise apartment complex, and into a lower area that also housed people in alcoves that had been hollowed by wind and rain and later turned into apartments that became part of the Montezuma Castle neighborhood.
So I've moved away from scenes of the castle set high in the walls to another section which is low to the ground. You can see the outline of the remains of walls of the Pueblo. You notice the black square rock in the middle of that room. That's a metate that they used to grind corn and other flours on. You'll also see behind me remains of other walls and how they moved up and used the different caves and enclosed them in walls for protection. So all this represented the last great building effort And for some reason, around 1400, 1425, it seems like all the Pueblo people abandoned the areas they were in. Archaeologists differ as to the reasons. Some think it was a war because of all the defensive positions of the Pueblos. Some people think disease. Some think famine, drought. However, you have to realize that for hundreds of years, people lived in small communities. They used to use pit houses that were partially underground. They moved on to the Pueblo rooms. And then we entered around 1100, the era of the great Pueblos. These were multi-storied, housing hundreds of families. They contained several kivas, which were underground ceremonial rooms. So, it had become a highly developed, civilized culture. But I think, personally, sanitation maybe got them. Originally, when they traveled around in small groups, sanitation was not an issue. They were always moving, sand could absorb waste. When you start getting hundreds of people congregating in one pueblo, sanitation's going to become a problem. Did it access the river and make them sick? Also, we're in desert. Trees don't grow very fast or very big here. They would have used up all the trees for the roofs of their buildings and for their cooking fires, and it would take a long time for the vegetation to regrow and support these hundreds, if not thousands, of people. For a long time, it was popularly believed the people vanished all over this area. Where did they go? They didn't vanish. They still existed as people. They just moved on to another area. Archaeologists then gave them a different name. They never called themselves Sanawa or Hopi. This is names, terms given by archaeologists so that they can study them and communicate. For an example, we're in Camp Verde, which is central Arizona. It's the high desert. It's transitioning into higher, cooler areas. This was a major ranching area from the late 1800s until maybe the 1960s. You would find many ranches. And what do you think archaeologists would uncover if they were to excavate our culture years later? They would find from the cowboy era leather for chaps, for saddles, for reins. They'd find metal because they had metal cookware. Well, 1960s came. This area kind of got discovered for its warm weather and became a retirement area. There are still ranches here, but they're dwindling. But the cowboys didn't just die out overnight. There is still cowboy ranch culture, but there's also now a more modern culture. Archaeologists would find now plastic from iPods, iPads, TVs, telephones, records, just on and on and on. Yet, they were descendants of the cowboys, but their technology changed. But they're still here, so they didn't vanish, they evolved. So today, this area we've been talking about is home to other tribes. The Yavapai Apache Indian Reservation is here. They make an income because in Arizona, only the Indian tribes are allowed to have casinos. And they have started Cliff Castle Casino, named after the ruin you have just visited. And this is a major source of income and work for the tribe. So you can see how things change over time.
So here is that casino, Cliff Castle, up on the hill. You can see how they almost modeled it to look a lot like the castle itself, Montezuma's Castle. So have a great rest Castle Flat.